Hopefully we'll get a few people jumping on here. In the meantime, I'll kind of throw up where we are headed with all of this. So what we're going to walk through is kind of how I'm building out the tutorial for AG's books using Next.js. So on the new HMP page, so this is kind of the behind the scenes view of it. I don't have these lessons quite out there yet. Here's the intro that we're walking through right now. And it's got the different technologies that we'll end up using. So I will clean up this video for all of the main YouTube feeds, but I thought it would be kind of cool for everyone that follows HMP and just who is interested in how I do this and the process. But the first intro goes through React. Apparently the React.js logo is not correct. I'll get that fixed. Firebase, RxJS, and RxFire. And so what we're going to end up with is a Next.js static site rendered site that is built with Material UI and Next.js. And so what it's going to do is have navigations through books. And then those books after this list, which is coming from Firebase Firestore, it will come in, and this is actually, it's probably poorly named, so that might be a tweak that we actually end up having before I release the full tutorial. But this is the unbranded cotton hat book, and it has 5 different chapters, and each of those chapters have 25 pages. And so you can theoretically page through this book and read it as you're going through it. So the goal of this is basically to have the knowledge of Next.js and how to statically render a site, along with Firebase background, Firestore knowledge, the Firestore admin SDK, and then we'll just keep building this out from here, so that everyone can learn Next.js together, a little bit of React since I'm brand new to React, and then we'll just keep going, whatever the community wants. There's some new Firebase alpha things that I'm a part of that are going to be coming out very soon. I just got the email they should be releasing into the beta realm real soon, so we'll cover that shortly. I'd love any feedback in the comments section. I've thrown out there on our Slack channel this link, our Hangouts link, so anyone wanting to jump on that. It's probably going to crush my computer, but we'll attempt this and see how it goes. I don't see anybody on the live chat right now, so I'm just going to kind of continue walking through what this looks like for us. Hang on one sec here. Okay. So the way I have this structured, again, is several different steps through the tutorial. I build all of my kind of the lead-in tags and the photos that you see on the YouTube channels and everything under HMP. All of these photos, they're all built out of Figma. So typically when I'm laying out courses like this, I usually go through my keep notes, so I can bring that up. And I have a ton of different things kind of building up in my backlog for AJ's Week in Web and HMP backlog for tasks to kind of finish out. So once that's completed, I usually take those and try to create something creative. I am by no means a artist or great at UX or UI design. I try my best. That's where I probably rely on the Ionics and the stencils and material UIs of the world. Probably too much. If you're a developer and not necessarily coming from that style, you'll probably be in the same boat as me. But then I just build out any content that's required for each one of these steps in the series, and I like to list them all together. So this is my Figma like complete React folder that I have out here so far. So we're checking out the different steps that we're going to go through. The greatest part about this is I've broken this down into all 8 of these branches that you can just step right into and forcibly load. So what's going to be pretty cool is we'll start with the intro, and if you take a look, this really has nothing in it at this point, right? So we've got our standard like React welcome card and everything else. Diving into the setup side of this, you can see we start to get into pages, and this is where we get the Hello Next side. We can also take a look at the package.json, and in here it's going to start to have some of our scripts that we're going to want to look at for Next.js. Feel free to comment out there, anyone that's watching it. It seems like there's a few of you out there. I just don't see anyone chatting. Here, I'll say hello first. Alright, let's jump back over here. So what's going to happen next is we're going to fire up our server. So we'll do npm run dev. And I'm probably going to get a collision because I have my Hugo server running. Alright, let's see what this does. Alright, so that is step number 1. And you can, bouncing around a little bit, but our hello next.js is in our pages folder in index.tsx. So trying to stick with TypeScript throughout this whole process. It's a little bit easier for me coming from the Angular world. It also helps, I think, when you're doing strict TypeScript. So at this point, there's not much more to go through on here. We could take a look on what's on my AJ notes, but just know this is just getting us up and running at this point. So the next step is the material UI. So there's a little bit more detail around the material UI side of things. And you actually have to, you don't have to, but what I did was created a theme, and we're gonna use that theme throughout the rest of the course for this. The other 2 important parts of the material UI is that you have to override the _app.tsx file and the _document file. And I'll dive into that deeper on the main AJ on Perfect Solutions. That one's for my wife. She always corrects me. So you have to override this to get some of the additional requirements for material UI. So at this point, if we were to run this, you should start to see you know what? I know exactly what's going wrong. So this is kind of fun to do this live. I did not do my npm install, and since we introduced that package.json for the first time, we're actually bringing in the material UI core icon styles. It's probably not necessary at this point to include Firebase and RxJS, but those are the the dependencies that we'll need later on as we get through this. Okay, let's fire this up again. Oops. Okay, so as you can see, we now have all of our theme that's built out around this. So in our app here, we actually have the container, which is coming from the Next app. The head is also from Next. Not much to it. You can get way more complex. I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible. The next piece is kind of interesting. So the theme provider is actually going to be coming from the Material UI Styles section. And that's where we start to get into the interesting parts about this theme. So let's keep going here. So the menu app bar and the component pieces are basically all that we need right now, just for this simple example. So we don't have anything working here. There's no additional pages, but this gets kind of the core setup for using Next.js with Material UI. The next step in this course, we're going to take care of some navigational points. So you'll start to see there's additional pages now. Just make sure I'm not missing anything here. All right, so we took that first index page and we removed that hello world essentially. And what we did is created a new components folder. And in the components folder, we have a couple different things. The main one that we're looking at here is the welcome card. So if we dive over to that welcome card, you can start to see that this has different styles. So the use styles piece to this is a big part of the Material UI. What that provides us through the props is that we can access like this class's card right here. We can look at card and it provides us min width 275. So let's actually take a peek in our dev tools what this really means. Jump into React World. Here, this might be easier to see this way. Okay, so if we scroll up here, let's see if I can find theme. Here's our theme provider. You'll see these props that are coming through. And I'm probably telling you the wrong thing. Let's see here. With the styles. Oh, welcome card, sorry. Further down. So you'll actually start to see that these props that get included in here, some of them I've added, and then you start to see the class names that are coming through here as well. I'll dive deeper into that. I feel a little hesitant since I'm so new to the React world to find the right thing at this point. But there's a lot going on that is provided for us just by using Material UI. Okay, let me jump back out of there. Again, I don't want to belabor this. We'll cover it much deeper in the courses. I just, again, wanted to give all of my awesome followers, my perfect peeps, a little show in the background here. So the next part of this is going to be on the Firebase side. So again, we'll switch over to the Firebase branch. Make sure we're not missing anything again. Okay, so you probably noticed we actually switched themes at this point too. So if we take a look at that themes folder real quick, you can see in here that I ended up taking and swapping out the default that was suggested. So let's switch back to 4 here. Here was the original palette, and you can see it switching in and out behind here. When I switched that branch up to 5, I've actually taken and used the dark theme palette. That's provided with Material UI, so that deep purple that comes in. This is a lot, it's very similar to the Angular setup once you have this created. Okay, so on the Firebase side of things, when we click this Go to Books, that link is actually driving out to Pages, Books. Right, so Next.js, the way you can navigate are from page to page. Let's see, maybe I'm messing something up switching from branches. Big time. Oh, looks like we might have lost the live view here. First time live stream. Let's see if this comes back. Okay, hopefully I am still out here streaming. If I lost some of you, I apologize. We'll get through this eventually. Okay, so you can see here that it's actually reaching out to Firestore and pulling in our books. So this is pretty, it's pretty simple setup once you have kind of the base loaded up. So this component did mount is actually waiting for the Firebase piece to load, and once we do this we can import it each time. So the library that we have, or the lib firebase.ts that we have set up here, kind of contains all of our initialization and uses the Firebase config from the normal console. So let me show you that really quickly, or somewhat quickly. Okay. So I'm actually hosting a couple different domains out here, but the database for this one is being used by 2 different sites. So the reason that we have kind of the layout that we do is I'm trying to attempt to copy this as well somewhat, which is a comparison to the Angular side of this. So we'll dive down both branches once we get going here, but it should have a different look and feel. I need to update it, but we're working on some of the different UI features from Angular material. Okay, sorry, getting sidetracked there a little bit. So in our database, here's what it looks like when we dive into books. You can actually see how it's got the unbranded cotton hat. It should be the same. So here is your unbranded cotton hat title. Okay, so right now you're probably thinking, Alex, you're crazy. Why are you using these titles? Why is it so weird? The reason for that is another setup that we have, and again, I'll walk through this during the Firebase training, or lesson rather. So let's see here. What did I call this thing? Here we go. So what we're actually doing here is using the Firebase admin to create sample books with authors and pages, and we're using the Faker API. So that's where I'm coming up with those random different names and things. It also allows me to do some, basic config work and things like that. And that'll be available just like this whole course on GitHub, so you can pull that in and check it out as well. Okay, continuing to walk through. So at that point, if you're familiar with Firebase, you should recognize the fact that we're just calling out the collection for books, and that's where these 5 books are coming from. Now, I am unfamiliar in React, so for those of you that are way better than I am, please give me some feedback. The way that we're doing this right now is using RxJS or RxFire for Firestore, and we're subscribing to an observable. And when that observable returns, we're actually setting the state on this component called books. If there's a better way to do this, I'd love to hear it. I'm brand new to that side of it. And once that renders, you can see it will just use a map to go through each book and create kind of this layout that we have here. And here are all our components again. So that book card, we can do all of the styling, and it starts to kind of use the dry pattern a little bit. And we can do more things, a little more fun right now. But right now the on-click feature of this, maybe not the on-click. Here it is, the href for the next link, which is the other big part that we're going to go through for the navigation side. That's just set up to go back to the home page. So if I click this, it's driving right back there. Okay, now the next part, did I cover everything there? For the most part. So we start to set up the Firebase project at this point. I'm going to do that npmi one more time. Fire up the old dev server. Okay. So at this point, we want to change a few things, but we also need to take a look at kind of what's coming next after this. So even though this is called Firebase Project, the next two are really where the rubber hits the road, if you will. So taking a look in here, we have our firebase.json, which kind of has our Firebase setup to it. So it details out where our Firestore rules are and the functions and things like that. It says that mine's targeting HMP AG's books, which I'm logged into. And then here are all of my database rules. So I'm a big proponent of leaving your database locked in Firestore so nothing accidentally gets forgotten to get locked down or gets left out. And then we're actually covering all of the different rules that are applied for these books. So it's pretty simple right now. Who can read, write, update. There's an admin section on the Angular page, and I'm hoping to complete that on this React side or React Next.js as well. So let's see, that's probably the majority of it except for functions. Okay, so functions are where some of the very important parts of this are going to start to appear. So this hello world function, so this is a cloud function in Firestore, and what's going to happen locally is we're going to start to serve these cloud functions just like we would in cloud functions on Firebase, and we're going to kind of do some craziness that the Zeit people on the now might not approve of. Maybe they do, I don't know, but using now to host a Next.js server or development deployment is probably the easiest way to go about this, but I am a huge Firebase fan. I try to stay within that entire infrastructure. So with all of that said, just know that this is just a hello world function that returns hello from Firebase. I'll dive into that again during the Firebase project. I'm just trying to walk you through a few of the steps here. Actually, let me see if I can do Firebase just to kind of show you an example of how this works. Nope. Yeah, that's not going to work. Okay, so just know that that's there. The reason it's not working is because I have to shuffle around some of the different folders. Okay, where are we at? 6, 7 is our book navigation. So you kind of see immediately we're in this functions folder, and it's going to start to require some of our server-side rendering. So what becomes interesting is that Zeit, or Next.js rather, allows us to kind of create lambdas. I shouldn't say dynamically. When it's doing its compiling and it sees, let's see here. I don't have it in the example. I'll do it right after this. So right now, let's just focus on the navigational side to this. So what's going to happen now if I do this? So for all of this so far, we are basically sitting on, we're not using server-side rendering, okay? So React is actually getting up to the browser and we're utilizing it. So if we take a look, when we go to books, again, that looks like this. Here's all of our books popping out. They have your summaries of each book. Now when I click on this, it's just going to navigate correctly to this unbranded cotton hat. If I go back, it lists it again. And that's kind of how it works. The reason the images are kind of flipping around, by the way, I've been considering hard coding these, and maybe I should so they would make more sense, but with that Faker API, it goes out and grabs lorem pixel images, and they always change every time you reload. So that's why these are kind of floating in and out differently every time you load them. It's not us doing anything with the pictures. But that is basically the navigation. So I just went from books to book, and it says a book. So we take a look at the page book. Here's a book. So again, very simple, trying to break this down. This next step is where things start to get a little crazy. So let's do our process here. Install, make sure we have everything. Okay, so we're back on localhost 3000. We have our main welcome to AJ's books. Again, that's coming from our index, which has a component called welcome card. And what this is going to drive us to is a books page. So again, when we hit this, if we take a look, you're going to see right here that it's failing. And the reason for this is that it's looking at this port 5001. So we've stopped utilizing the kind of the front end JavaScript React.js way of loading this. So Firebase, and there's probably a more clever way to fail over to this, but point being, if I go up to our books now, there's something special in here called, I'm probably passing it every time I pass here. So this component did mount, okay? It starts to load up. And let me break into the Next.js just to make sure. So Next 9 really changed some things around. So let's see if I can find exactly so I can show you. Okay, so if you look through their documentation on get initial props, this is part of the life cycle and the Lambda side of this that Next.js understands. If it has get initial props, we need to take a look at how to populate that data, okay? So that's the important part right there. So it's async, and it can fetch anything that resolves to a JavaScript plain object, which populates props. So what we're doing over here is, in this get initial props, we are using this fetch endpoint to books. Now the reason it's failing is we are not currently serving a local version of that. And what I mean by that is that in functions, when we look over here, we don't currently have our Firebase cloud functions built out for book or books. So what we're going to do is run Firebase. Actually, I'm not going to run Firebase serve because it's a little more complicated than that. And luckily, I have set up over here this Firebase serve that will take care of a bunch of this. It's got to move some files around and lambdas. I'll show you here in just 1 second. See if anyone pings us back here. Any questions? Feel free to comment on YouTube, guys and gals. Okay, so diving back over. So it's going through quite a few different steps right now. You'll notice here that in the pages side of this, it's actually got this little thing right here, and that's the Lambda. And so our book and books are both creating Lambda functions, okay? And this talks about the get initial props. The only static piece to this is the index. So correspondingly, if we look at our firebase.json, we have that same setup. So for book and books, we know we need to go to our books and book function, but index handles the rest. So if we come up here to functions, again, it's just looking for our lambdas and it's going to handle everything. The one difference on this is in our API. So the API part of this is doing some server-side rendering for the fetches, but I will get to that in a moment. So let's see if this failed or not. Okay. So it looks like everything's running. We can look down here and see. Hopefully you guys can see this. Okay. Go up a little. AJ has arrived, folks. Floating around my feet. Okay. So here is the local server that's serving up the static created files, or the hosted files rather. Here are our three functions. So we have our book, books, and our API. Now what we can do now, even though this is being served on 5000, the way I have this set up is that actually thinks it's in production, and we don't really want to look at that yet. What we're going to do is create another tab, or a terminal, and do, let's see, we'll do npm run dev. Okay, shrink this back down a smidge more. Okay, now this dev version understands that it wants to look at our static site rendered side of things. So I can run this locally and debug any of my functions or my API. So this time when I hit go to books, you'll actually notice, do this again, if I refresh, that just statically rendered before Firestore ever hit. And I can prove this out too if I take and change a few things. So let's take a look over here. So if I look at books, there is this Firebase piece to it. Okay, and then our component did mount. If I take the whole Firebase piece out, let's take a look at this. Let's jump back over here. Okay, so yeah. This is where TypeScript tends to get you occasionally. So let's just take the subscribe away, or we'll take this out. So it'll still run, it just won't update state. Sorry, TypeScript hates me. Let's do that, and then let's do that, and that, and that. Okay. Now we'll check this out. So you'll see in here, let me clear this, let me reload. Nowhere in here did Firebase run at all. And you'll also notice that the only thing that it's asking for is books at the local layer. So that's Next and the Webpack, but it's not pushing this data for these books across an API. It is server rendering all of this when it comes back in an object. So the way we can also take a look at this is if we go to component did mount. Actually, let's see here. Here's our books. Okay, let's take a look at this. Okay, let's refresh this again. You'll see that the 5 objects actually appeared. These aren't Firebase documents or anything like that. They're already in our book props. So we could also take and look at the response, which is kind of cool, up here. Okay, so what's going on here? If we do this refresh, Sorry I'm bouncing around too much. So let's do a refresh on this page again. So there's our console 5, but where is the other data? Because it's on the server, this console log here is actually pushing that out to my terminal because it's actually created on the server side. So we could actually go a step further and say there's your IM client. Let's refresh once. Here's your IM client. Here's your IM server. So that's just kind of a quick explanation. Again, I'll try to dive into that further as far as how server-side rendering works and how we're calling it. For us, oops. Where is my git control? Let's back all this up. So the key for us though is that we can now test all of our Firebase cloud functions as well as our Firebase Firestore locally, completely, which is awesome. So if I kill both these, what I'm actually doing is serving this completely out of this dist file. And you'll see that our functions are written in TypeScript, which is cool. So you have our API. Here's how we're getting the book, the books, chapters. These are all available on the statics or the server rendered side. And the great part about this is that it will take all of that and put them into functions. Our serverless functions are actually right here. So here is your lambda for book and your lambda for books. And we're just referencing those right here. Book and books. So that's the cool part about Next.js. It easily has created serverless lambdas, which makes this a piece of cake to really get going with server-side rendering. You can add a lot of functionality into this. So in a nutshell, that is what we're doing. We're kind of creating just a simple tutorial. I plan on this only being phase 1, and we'll continue it on past this. I hope this helps people learn React.js, Next.js using Material UI and Firebase. If you have any questions, again, hit us up on the Slack channel for AJMP. Let me throw those out there. So here's the please subscribe part of my video that everyone likes to push out there. Here's the Slack invite. You can hit us up on all the socials, but here is the main site as well. Again, I'm here to teach. I hope you're learning something. Feel free to reach out, DM in any way, shape, or form. Thanks for being with us. I think this is awesome. Thanks for joining Perfect Peeps. We'll see you next time.